Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education Research Center, and today I am joined by Jacob Abbott. Jacob, how are you?
Doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me just get started with share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Jacob Abbott, and I work for AWS. So, if you don't know aware of that, it's Amazon Web Services. I assume if you're in tech, you probably know AWS versus Amazon, but the leader in global computing. So, my role there is I'm the global team lead for our partner practice around cloud operations. Cloud operations and things like observability, cloud management tools, like how is your cloud environment running, identity. So think about single sign-on. We have a service called Cognito. We have a bunch of different services that I overlook and try to build go-to-market strategies around those services for our partners to help deliver to customers.
Awesome. Well, I know a little bit about your background and your career path, and it's a interesting one. Made a few changes here and there, but I think it would be interesting. Share a little bit about your career journey.
Sure. Yeah. It's been a little windy. This is the best way to put it, right? You kind of, you had me in class, so you never know I had different focuses on different things, and I enjoyed working with people. But to kick it off, I was a network engineer, right? I went to, as a TSM student, and I decided to go, I like networking. I like to be doing routing and switching and all of that fun stuff. So I was looking for jobs, and this is right around 2006 timeframe, right? There wasn't, the tech market was starting to explode, after the crash. People were starting to get new jobs. And I had moved to Boston, Massachusetts. I had family there, and I couldn't find a job. So I actually worked at Geek Squad. I was at Best Buy for a little bit. I was spending a year there. So I got all this education around networking, and that's where I went. And I couldn't find anything. But luckily, having moved to that role up there, I was able to meet some people, and I got a job at Fidelity Investments. So they're the largest private mutual fund company in the world, and I was associate engineer. And there, that's where I would call it my first real job, right? I was a network engineer. I was going in doing configurations, right? Architectural work, but it was a junior level role. So I was still like learning from all of these folks, and it was a very cool job because I was dealing with, my boss said, we're going to lose $1 million a minute every time we're down. And this is back in 2006 timeframe. So I can only imagine what that is today. And from there, I learned networking. I started to learn about other aspects of the jobs that I'd never really heard of, like vendor management and sales, right? And, business development. So all of these other outside things that influenced us really started to pique my interest about learning new things. And then around that same time, I was also getting a little tired of being a little bit homesick. So I moved back to Kentucky and Louisville. I worked at a job that I won't mention because I didn't really like it. And then I I changed roles, and I worked at Yum Brands. And Yum Brands, I was still in that network engineering type of role. And if you're not familiar with Yum Brands, it's KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. They used to have Long John Silver's and A&W. And that role was really cool. I was working with all of these restaurants all over the country. It's about 35,000 restaurants at the time, helping them design a new network, right? From a very distributed side of the environment. So little boxes going from Fidelity, which had the big boxes, the big switches, the big routers, the high performance machines, to this distributed retail environment. So I kind of got a whole other aspect. It was almost like relearning everything. It's completely different, apples and oranges. I did that for a while. And in that role, I started to have to do more of manager duties, right? I had to start leading a team. I had to start driving, P&L, right? How do we grow this, not really grow this business, but how do we lower our cost but provide better performance to our users, which was the restaurants. So that's where I really got into the vendor management thing. And I had I don't want to say we went to the dark side at this point, but I was starting to learn, there's these other cool things out there called sales engineers and solutions architects and business development leaders, right? And all these other things that I never, I kind of heard of, but I didn't really get into. So at that point, I decided to switch. I went from a engineering mindset to more of the sales, right? I was helping provide a solution to customers. And I joined a startup called Airtight Networks. It eventually got rebranded into Mojo Networks, and we got acquired by Arista Networks. But that path was really cool. That I learned a lot about product development, sales, marketing. Right, I was basically taking and building a new access point that would be designed for security and for the highest security customers, like think of Department of Defense, maybe some other three-letter agencies in the government, working with retail establishments to talk about PCI compliance, to talk about hospitals and HIPAA, right? How do we cover wireless security? So that job, I really kind of got my roots in. How do we take something from a customer request through engineering, product design, and then marketing and sales? How do we price it? How do we sell it? How do we position this in the market that would go to market? So that's where I really grew. And I was there for about 5 years, through the different names. And then one of my other customers of that product was maturing in the space, and they were very interesting to see what they were doing in the world of distributed retail. So if you take my past experience at Yum, and then my technology experience and product development skills that I learned at Arista and Mojo, Comcast Business came into the picture, which are like, how does Comcast come into this picture, right? I mean, it's like, what are they doing? Well, a lot of people don't know Comcast Business actually has an enterprise division, and that enterprise division sells to distributed retail environments. If a KFC needed internet, who do you go to get that, right? You didn't just go to the local provider. You would have to go to some kind of aggregate company out there to bill it all together, provide different DSL options or cable or satellite or cellular. So I took all that experience and I was able to go to Comcast, and I became a sales guy. I think my title was Senior Enterprise Strategic Account Executive, something crazy long. But I took that sales acumen, and that's where I started to hone it, right? I had to be responsible for my quota, right? As a sales engineer in my past, and I had a little bit of responsibility for it, but I didn't have the whole thing, right? So I was able to take that, and I learned how to be a sales guy, and I was driving, basically building solution sets for customers, right? And you get paid more, right? A sales guy gets paid more. Solutions engineers or sales engineers, solutions architects, whatever you want to call them, they're usually, unquote, the smarter people in the room. But the sales guys had this weird way of communicating to people, right? And I had always been kind of that weird technical guy that could talk to people, right? And I think that was what really set me apart there, and I loved it. I mean, I did really well there. However, you're going to see a repeating cycle here. I had a customer of mine back at Mojo reach out to me about another role, and that was with AWS. So I'm at AWS now. I came over on board to be the practice lead for security, meaning how do I help partners drive their security practices and offerings to customers? So think of the software space. So you think of like the Laceworks or the Cisco's or the CrowdStrikes, Lace. There's a bunch of them, right? So working with all of those globally, as well as all the SIs and GSIs. So those are like Deloitte's, Accenture's, Presidio's. There's roughly about 120,000 partners in the network. So helping them drive security to the best of our customers. So you take that sales skill, the product, discipline that product management discipline I received at Mojo, as well as the business development, as well as the end user side, kind of morph it all together. Now I'm what's basically a business development leader. So security, then I got promoted to lead the security and manage the security service provider space. And then I took over a bigger business, which is partner cloud ops, and that's where I am today. So all of that, I know it's a long journey and it's windy, but I would say the common theme out of that was I was able to build those relationships in between there and keep learning, right? Always be curious.
I think that those last two tips are really important. The being able to speak to others and keep learning. I think those are keys that have made you as successful as you are. So in this long, winding journey that you've been on, I know I've heard some of them. You've been part of a lot of cool experiences and a lot of cool opportunities. Share one of those, whether that's networking, whether that's wireless, whether that's security. Share one of those that you can from your career so far.
Sure. So out of that winding career, there's different cool things I got to do. from being a customer to being a vendor to being, team leader. It's pretty interesting. So I'll share a couple stories. Back in the Mojo days, right, in Arista, we were known for our wireless hacking, right? Wireless, thwarting wireless hackers. We had some really cool technology called marker packets that would basically find rogue devices or any evil or malicious actors right around you. And as a sales engineer in that role, I got to see all kinds of things in different environments, which I probably really can't talk about. But what I can talk about is I was able to demo a lot of this, and I actually did this at one of the Murray State events there at Patterns. And I was in a conference room, and it was in Italy. I was in, I believe this was in Bari, Italy, which is like in the southeast, somewhere on the south side of Italy, demoing this for a bunch of partners in the Italy market. And I was up on stage, and I was doing my normal routine, pitch, and I pull up a Wi-Fi pineapple, right? And this was before they were probably really well known. And I started to show people what they were browsing. Why they didn't know it. Like, they didn't know that I had phished them during this presentation. There's probably about 60 or 7 people in this room, and probably about 30 people connected, and I phished and I took them in. And I was able to start showing them what they were browsing for. I was showing the images that they were downloading right through standard HTML, and it freaked them out. It's the best sales pitch ever, because if you show them how easy it is to hack them, they just buy right there. But with that being said, that experience of being able to show that to different groups was really cool. Now, from I have other stories about networking that I can go into where I made mistakes and learned a lot of cool stuff. But I'm gonna go to a more recent one. So back in AWS has their large security show in the summer. It's called Reinforce, and Reinforce is really focused on helping customers and partners alike learn how to develop their security skills or see what's new and hot. What do we see is coming in the next year? And I had the privilege of leading the team and redesigning what we call the security competency. So the security competency is basically, we have an audit mechanism through case studies and very prescriptive guidance on how is a partner performing in a realm. So there's different competencies for DevOps, for storage. I developed one for security. So I took all of these different pieces of information from different teams that we were seeing from customers, and was able to package it up. And so one of my highlights in my career was that our CISO of Amazon actually was on stage and presented this to the 30,000 people or so that were there. So it was really cool to see something that I helped create and lead on the screen. So I've seen everything from the technical side to the project side. So it's there's a lot of cool experiences I've had, for sure.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard that. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you shared a couple of tips, but I'm going to ask you the question again.
Mm-hmm.
For a student that is thinking about some aspect of your career as their choice for career, what is a tip that you would give them as they just get started?
I think always be learning, right? I mean, you're not going to know everything coming out of college, right? You're not going to know everything in ever. So continue to learn, and you're never necessarily going to find your dream job right out of college either, right? I didn't. I worked at Best Buy. It was cool, made some friends, but I was able to build relationships. So my comment is always build relationships, and know what people are going through. And this is more of a kind of a personal thing, right? Not necessarily a career, but everybody's fighting something and doing something. Build your empathy, right? Have a high level of EQ, be able to build those relationships, and from there you can form some bonds that will last forever. 2 or 3 of my jobs I didn't have to interview for, because I knew the people that were interviewing me so well that I was able to move to the next segment in my career. So 1 is learn to be curious. 2 is build your relationships and have an high EQ.
Those are good tips. Well, last question that students ask me all the time, so I want to ask you as well, is again, for a student, someone just getting started in their career, what certifications do you recommend, if any at all?
It's a tough question, really. It depends on what line of work you're going into. And my first job at Fidelity, my boss did not believe in certifications. He believed in on-site experience, and that kind of grew with me as I went on. With that being said, to my first point, then on the last question, learn and be curious. I don't think it's ever a negative thing to go out and find something that you're interested in, learn about it. If that means you want to go in the network realm, there's not many other places that you can learn a lot of the cool stuff like CCNA, right, or CCNP, or eventually CCIE, right? If you want to look more at cloud computing, sure, I'll pitch AWS, right? We have all kinds of certifications, but so does everybody else, right? So if there's a certain niche that you're really interested in, I think it's highly valuable. But the experience and being able to be agile and learn on the job is always going to be more important, in my opinion, than a certification. But don't let that stop you from going to get one because you think there's some valuable information. Don't take a test to take a test. Take the test because you want to learn the information.
I think that's good advice as well. Well, I think I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Let me, as we wrap up, just ask: is there anything else that you want to share that you haven't?
Hey, it all started from Murray State, right? I was able to. I remember it vividly. I was a junior in college, or sorry, junior in high school at Callaway County, and I remember seeing a flyer on the bulletin board that said telecommunication systems management. I think it was the first year of the program because I hadn't heard of it before. I applied for 2 schools, or I'm going to rephrase that. I think I applied for 2 schools in high school. One was Murray State because I was a local kid, and networking was something I was interested in, mainly spurred by a Nortel networking class that we took in high school. It was a very small program. It was mostly playing StarCraft. But for the most part, that got me interested in networking. Right? How do these devices talk to each other? The other school that I applied for, or I say I applied for, was MIT, because it was the only thing that had a program like it at the time. And I only say I applied for it, I think, because I don't think my parents ever mailed the letter for my acceptance there. So I would say that it all spurred from the TSM program. I did security and wireless as my specialties, and ended up in a security and wireless realm for a long period of time, and still in security. So I would say it's always evolving.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Well, thank you again very much, and I appreciate your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Thank you.